Thank you so very much. Please be seated. Thank you, Chidima, for that very kind introduction. I think I should come and get some tips from you. That was well curated. So, my slides up? Good morning, everyone. Happy Workers' Day. All right, here we go. So, this is me, Ngozi Akinyele, who has anchored the platform for over half of those 20 years. Ngozi Akinyele here interviewing the Vice President of Nigeria at the time. Here also welcoming the former Minister of Finance at the Coronation Art Gallery where I direct. Here, curating a celebratory moment with the richest man in Africa, and of course my esteemed colleagues. Here, kicking up a strategic partnership with the National Commission for Museums and Monuments. Here, addressing the global media at the Nigerian Modernism exhibition, where the president was recently welcomed on his state visit to the UK. And me every day working alongside my chairman, who leads one of the most respected financial institutions in Africa. Yet, when the convener of the platform, Pastor Poju, decided to upgrade my JD from moderator to speaker last year, I panicked. And so I prayed to God to just allow something come up at work so that I would have one more year to really achieve many things and get ready by 2026. But that prayer was not answered because clearly I spoke at the last platform on the topic, the heart of intrapreneurship. And I think for some reason, there was a very zealous angel who heard my prayer and just forgot to cancel my 2026 speaking slot. So that's why I'm here, I think, speaking on the topic, the heart of intrapreneurship 2.0. My gratitude goes to Pastor Poju and Pastor Tony for the immense opportunity that this is, and I intend to make the most of it. So, let's dive right in. How many of us are entrepreneurs here? You run a business, you own a business. Please raise your hands. Clearly, okay. So that's a lot of us, right? So if you wondered like me why we are talking about intrapreneurship, where this is a gathering of entrepreneurs, I wondered myself, but I found my answer in this very apt definition of the word entrepreneurs by one of my mentors, Ndidi Ukaonu. And she simply defines entrepreneurs as people who make things happen, who are true engines of transformation within an organization. And she also lays out this powerful equation that we're going to come to as we go through this intervention this morning. Essentially, an employee who has the X factor and the Y factor will become an entrepreneur, right? That's what it says. The X factor here are intrinsic factors, how we are wired. And then the Y factor are the factors that drive us or motivate us in the workplace. So in other words, this equation says, if a particular individual is wired in a certain way, fired up by certain factors, they will become an employee who makes things happen. So let's find out more about X. Previously on the heart of intrapreneurship, if I'll get some audio. So I'll start with the stone. It's always good to start with the heavier task, like they say, right, in problem solving. I said you should help me get a lighter stone. So I'm going to drop it in. This is our time and chance now, as ubiquitous as water is, right? The people, the problems, the platforms is our water. And here is our stone. completely impervious to its environment, sinks right to the bottom, doesn't change in shape, doesn't adapt, doesn't expand, just sits right there complaining, blaming, and obviously blocking the flow of others. On the other hand, we have in the same environment, in the same time and chance, gets into the water, goes through time and chance every day, absorbs the water, becomes heavier, can clean things, adapts, changes shape, maybe not this particular one, but changes shape, becomes a conduit to be able to impact the lives of others. And then it goes back into time and chance, once again, interacting with the environment, with people and problems, filling up again, and impacting even more lives. So that was the X factor. Okay, you want to clap? Okay, go ahead and clap. I'm glad you got it, because it's very uncomfortable watching yourself. It's just so cringy. But a few days later, precisely 15 days later, I got this message on LinkedIn. And M, for the purpose of this conversation, essentially says, I recently came across your insights on the stone mindset versus the sponge mindset. And it really struck a chord with me, said other things. But he says, I find myself struggling. I want to grow, I want to absorb, and I want to have, the sponge mindset. But it's hard to do that in an atmosphere that is suffocating and draining. How many of us can relate with that? Right? So in other words, sponge self. Sponge self, don't tire. So I'm going to unveil my experiment now and try to demonstrate what M is feeling. So we assume that we have a work environment where everything is cool and nice and dandy. But in reality, we have environments where you have micromanagement. What else should I pour next? Okay, extreme competition, I like that. Extreme competition, unhealthy competition, where there's so much, it's already feeling bloody here. Then burnout as a badge, right? What are other things? Sharp HR practices. Unpaid salaries, thank you. Please give me more. I still have more to go. What? Verbal abuse, shredding, misunderstanding, all of that happens in this environment, right? So we now have Mr. M, like myself and every other entrepreneur, assuming that this is an environment where we can grow and thrive and make ideas happen. But in reality, it's an environment where even an entrepreneur with the sponge mindset cannot make any ideas happen. Worse off, it's also an environment where that entrepreneur can soak up those negative attitudes and behaviors and then transfers that to other environments. Not where we want to be, right? So, particularly in small and medium organizations in Nigeria, we see some unique challenges. Where the boss says rest is overrated, but summer does not meet the boss in Nigeria or in Lagos, right? You know them. Names shall not be mentioned. We need face-to-face interaction for ideation, better team dynamics, right? We know that, and it's wonderful, we love it, but how much is fuel now? And we need to get to work. Okay. So we get ourselves to work, and then we also have to get ourselves to retreats and hangouts and take all the staff selfies and have all the vibes of our lives. But really, can someone tell us how our careers are really advancing here? And then, I like this one. We are family. We are family. We are building a future for Africa, for our future generations. But Oga, since we became family, we haven't heard anything about our taxes being remitted. We have not heard anything about our pension contributions being made. The pension that is supposed to help me even in this generation, let's even leave future generations, you have not paid it. And then we go on to say, this is an environment where we have high risk and high rewards. Okay, let's dwell on those rewards a little bit more. Employee share options. Employee share options, like we know it, right? Who has ever unlocked it? Short-term incentives, STI, TIs, or TC. And then we have this one. Promotion comes from the Lord, be patient. But you are the one to put my name on the Lord's list, and you have not done it. So altogether, we really know that so really, although all of these frustrations are not typical of all small and medium enterprises, certainly not the great ones that all of our great entrepreneurs who are here, lead and manage. We also know this, that there are several factors that drive your growth from being a small business to a startup and then a scale-up. You have your product market fit, right? You have your marketing and distribution, which is actually my day job. Capital strategy, figuring out how to keep your costs under control and how to manage regulation. All of those things are very important. However, your greatest advantage will come from the people who make ideas happen. So that becomes the premise of the rest of my intervention this morning. Enters the sponge boss. I know the very next question will be, who is the sponge boss, right? All right. So for the purpose of this discussion, the sponge boss is the one who understands the value of people in that equation. The sponge boss understands and he needs to create an environment where people can think, where people can try, they can learn, and they can contribute. That is the why factor. But what do we see across the UK and other labor markets where our current and future employees also seek to work? We see employees want the same things, right? Employees want flexibility. If you can see the text underneath the bars, they want flexibility, colleagues, great colleagues, fulfillment and autonomy, which are strong factors that correlate with innovation. And they want a healthy culture. Now look at some of the terms that are associated with a healthy culture as we dwell on that a little. Supportive, right? Caring, fair, professional. This is the 2026 data, what people want. Trusting, calm, professional, so many more along those lines. On the flip side, employees don't want to work in organizations where we have, I'm sorry to say, poor leadership, which is yourselves, pay dissatisfaction, lack of resources, and unhealthy culture. Now, see the strongest word associated with an unhealthy culture, an environment where the boss or the employer is selfish. In other words, entrepreneurs or employees will not make ideas happen in an environment where the boss is seen as thinking of me, myself, and I all the time. So we have other related words like toxic, unfair, unkind, busy, incompetent. All of these words come to mind. Now the final slide in this data set is truly powerful. The top 30 words that employees use to describe the employer. Have you thought about it? Maybe not to your face. Have you asked your employees how they will describe your work environment? Or they will describe you, better yet? right? So let me interpret the data for you very quickly. It simply says that if those who work with you describe you as considerate, trusting, or generous, or those words or their synonyms, 7 out of 10 of them are likely to stay for the long haul. Also, on the flip side, if those who work with you describe you as selfish, overly corporate, uncaring, then 8 out of 10 of them are active on LinkedIn right now, honored to be, excited to be, very, very deeply satisfied to be looking for a job today, which is Workers' Day. So what do you need to do to respond to all of this? Because I believe that it's not just about calling out, what is wrong, but it's about providing some perspectives and paradigms to help you see the unique position you occupy. So think about your first boss, right? Think about their sense of ambition, their drive, their values, and think of how much of that is still in you today. Why? Because your first boss creates an imprint that calibrates how you lead and how you follow later in life. You are the first boss for so many people. You have the opportunity not just to create an environment where intrapreneurship thrives, but a place where future leaders are shaped. So think about it. Today, it's not just Abraham that has many sons and daughters. Across corporate Nigeria, you have patriarchs and matriarchs whose entry-level employees are now CEOs and chairpersons of large organizations themselves. They started just like you. Once they were 5, and then they became 10. So you also will grow. You will become 10, and 50, and 500, and 5,000, and 50,000 people all across the globe making ideas happen. Thank you for that amen. I think you should amplify it. But when that time comes and your organization becomes that large, you would not be able to coach everyone directly. You would not be able to buy chocolates and perfumes when you travel for 50,000 people. You would not be able to remember everyone's son's birthday. Neither would you be with them when their parents pass on. But when that time comes, those who you have sown those seeds into will become the ones who multiply them. They will do those same things for the others and the others who will come after them. So then, your policies and your systems and all of the HR processes will inherit the spirit of excellence, of ethics, of empathy with which you are leading today. That is how the right culture is built. The one in which entrepreneurship thrives and the one in which ideas are made to happen. I'm not just talking about this, from a theoretical point of view, because I also have my own personal experiences across all of the bosses who I have worked with in my career. Beginning with my first boss, Mr. Debo Adediran, who owned a chain of small to medium-sized organizations. He encouraged me to go on an employability program at Workforce Center. And when I was done, he did something that shocked me. He picked up the phone and called a partner friend of his who worked at KPMG and said, "There's a young, smart girl who works with me, and I think she would have a brighter future working with you." So I got a call, took the test, and thank God I didn't disgrace him. I got into KPMG, but he proved something to me very early on in life, that vision is not one-sided. There are two sides to a vision, because vision also means you're able to spot potential and see people beyond being personnel, but see them as professionals in their entirety. So I get into KPMG, and one of the very first things you realize when you're a smart person in a Big Four firm is that you are never the smartest person in the room. You think you have always been the head girl and always come first, but you will see people who are fire. People who know so much. But very quickly you understand that that is the perfect environment to have the sponge mindset. So you are soaking up knowledge from the smartest people, like BC Lamikoran, who was the head of management consulting and the partner of financial services. She gave me my first opportunity in financial services. Until today, as she sits on several boards across the world, continues to find opportunities to open doors for me and helps me to serve in various capacities. Thank you, BC. Now, I come from consulting into Union Bank. Basically, an opportunity that became available because of my consulting work in financial services. And I crossed over from the culture of consulting to a 100-year-old institution that was slow and bureaucratic and seeking to become simpler and faster. That was the job that EE, the CEO of the bank, and Mien had to deal with. Now, one of my best definitions of culture is what the leader does and allows to be done. EE embodied what it meant to have a simpler and smarter culture. So for starters, EE was EE to everybody. He still is EE to everybody. So because the CEO goes on a first name basis, no matter how royal you think you are, you will never be called Your Royal Highness. But he also made certain important initiatives, like, separate elevators for executives were banned. Eating in offices was also banned. There were important steps to help break down those silos. And also, guess what? Literally, physical walls were broken. It wasn't just about an open door policy, but the walls actually came down. So it was a no-door situation, actually. But then innovation and initiative also became important values at the bank. And so enters level 4, Lola Cardoso, who headed up innovation and digital ventures. She brought structure to innovation, organizing the innovation challenges, the hackathons, which I would always participate in. But then we took that further into creating a digital ventures business that essentially meant that the rest of the bank was a mothership, and then the digital ventures was the speedboat. It was on that speedboat that I helped create and build several sub-brands in response to customer needs outside banking. And I had a direct boss, Joe Mbulu, who enabled my growth. There was never a time where I was unclear what was required to do to move to the next level. He was that specific. When I needed to expand my skills or pick up special projects, like when I had to pick up the project of managing the bank's centenary events, which brought me into marketing and communications and essentially brought me into my new north, which I'm absolutely loving. The 6th level, of course, was Ogochukwu Ekeze, who was my boss in marketing and communications and gave me the gift of adventure. I knew nothing about marketing and communications at that time. All I had was a flair. But she enabled me to train my guts, to build my skills, and to do work that I'm still proud of till today. And so finally, I work today with Mr. Aigboje Aigimokwere, and I have what you call stretch. Because I'm working based on an ambition that transcends one organization. It transcends one country, and it goes all the way to the continent. I'm leading partnerships across the world with a standard of excellence that is expected of me every single day. So, these 7 levers have taken me on a journey that is still very much in progress, but it looks like this so far. I have walked through local, regional organizations. I've gotten promoted quite a few times, done several roles, also had 3 beautiful children with my husband who helped work on these slides. But that is on the platform of the wonderful bosses that God has brought into my life. So the question is not about if you're a good boss or if you're a good person, really. That's not what I'm saying here, because you can be a good person and be a bad leader. It's about the systems that you are building. Which of these levers are you going to be pulling? Is it vision, where you need to help people see themselves more clearly in what you're doing? Are you really opening doors for people? Culture is an important one because you need to be able to invite challenge as a business owner. How many of us have people disagree with us? Because if two people work together and agree all the time, one of them is not thinking. Every single day, you have an opportunity to scale trust, and if you don't scale trust, you can't scale growth. Are you going to be thinking about your structure? Some organizations do not have an organogram. If you don't have an organogram, you're simply saying you're not intentional about anybody's growth. And it's like asking somebody to climb on a ladder when they can't see the next rung. So these are all levers that you need to consider as you think about building an environment where entrepreneurship can thrive. And if all I've said sounds all soft, and with these few points of mine, you still need some data, look at this survey that essentially shows that if an employee is loyal and you provide an environment where they have great colleagues, they have all the support that they need, they will be satisfied. And that satisfaction would lead to entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, as it rises, will drive firm growth, which is what you want. So let me come back to remind my entrepreneurs in my own constituency, because even in imperfect systems like we've shown here, value is still multidimensional. You still have your X factor, no matter what the Y says. I know the source of my X factor. I think I get it from my parents. My mother was born in Calabar to a family of 4 boys and 3 girls. Her father was ill-advised to stop sending his daughters to school because her brothers needed the money to go to school. So she had to work her way into school, eventually got into OAU, and she had to pick up basketball to be able to see herself through school with the sports bursary. My father was born in Ado-Ekiti to a large polygamous family. He got his whole life funding cut off when his mother made the tragic mistake of cooking poisonous mushrooms that claimed the lives of all 3 of his siblings in one day. So he got kicked out with her, of course, and moved to Ibadan. In Ibadan, he worked as a mechanic for several years, all across his teenage years, and eventually got into University of Ibadan without ever attending a secondary school. He also picked up football to be able to pay through school with the sports bursary. Guess where they met? I found this out on Monday. Guess where they met? They met at Nuga Games in 1976, and it was hosted in Ibadan. So you see, I was born about a decade later, so I still also have some association to this Ibadan thing, right? If you know, you know. But you see, that is the source of my X factor. Because even though I'm wearing a nice suit, inside me is still the DNA of grit, of determination, of focus, of the hungry sportsman. We were raised to have execution discipline, mental strength, adaptability under pressure, teamwork. These values were things we were taught even before we knew how to pronounce those words. They come with me wherever I go. Whatever role I occupy, even if I don't own the shop, what is your X factor? I'm not saying that if your parents didn't meet in Ibadan, you don't have the X factor. I'm not saying that if your parents are rich, and didn't play sports, you don't have the X factor. But I'm saying that you have your story. And if you think you don't have your story and there's no good in your background, then you are now the background. So let me end by sharing this, which is the source of my deepest convictions. This scripture from the Bible. And I'm going to carefully read it in the NACV translation. Who knows what translation that is? It's the Ngozi Akinyele corporate version. So let's read it together. Okay, you've had your bit, let me have mine. I read it as, have the same mindset as Christ, the greatest entrepreneur of all time, who was hired on a 3-year contract to make a great idea happen. Scratch that. To make the greatest idea in history happen. He knew what he was worth, but he didn't demand it prematurely. When he had fulfilled his contract terms, oh, he got a great package. So let me round up by letting you know, dear entrepreneurs, that it's still important to have the sponge mindset. Entrepreneurs, I would ask you today to be a good sponge boss, or better yet, be the God kind of sponge boss. Happy Workers' Day.
Keep the applause going. That was absolutely amazing. So, employees, you may want to send the link to your employers and tell them they have something very interesting they need to watch. Thank you for that. So they can be good sponge bosses.